Okay, this is my project that I did for Vision Tech this past month or so. And it's this pretty cool photo collage manipulation thing that I found online that I really thought was interesting and I wanted to do. And this is my tutorial to show you how I did it. First, I had my friend come and took a picture of me. And after I made it black and white, it ended up looking like this was one of them. And basically what I did was I took the pen tool, and which is this one right here, and make sure it's on freeform pen tool. That way you can draw however you please. And I just made a shape. Any shape, really, it doesn't matter, because most of them end up looking nothing like the ones that I made anyway. So you make a shape, make sure it's connected, closed all the way, and you go Command Return. And that selects your shape, so it's on there. And then make sure that your layer is also selected on here, because otherwise you might end up, if your layer's not selected, it's just on top. But say I'm selected my layer 7, it'll cut this part out of my layer 7 if there's something there. Doesn't look like there's anything there, so nothing would show up. So make sure that this layer that you want to cut the piece out of is highlighted. So then you just go out, Command Return to get it selected, and then you go Command J to take that piece, cut it, basically, not cut it, but copy it out of that layer and into a new layer, which is the J. And then there you have this piece. And don't worry about making it smooth. Like my tutorial said, that was a really big deal, but I discovered that it was easier if I just kind of made the generic shape and not worried about getting smooth, because that takes forever, 1. And then 2, they really don't end up looking anything like the shape anyway, so you can easily fix it. So next, after you have your shape, the next thing you do is you go to Liquify. And after you go to Liquify and it loads, make sure your brush is set kind of high, that way it pulls it. It won't pull anything skinny, because otherwise it won't show up at all. And you just go to it and you start from there and you just pull it to look exactly how you want. And this dark stuff is the new thing. And this dark stuff is the new shape that it's going to take. And this is the original right here. And notice you have to be selected on the layer, and it's the only layer you can touch. So everything else is kind of blotted out, so it's easier to tell which one you're on. And if you want to make it thicker or longer, you just keep pulling and you go over it like that. And you can go this way, just like that. And I might want something sticking out of here, so I just go like that. And oops, okay. So then I just click OK, and it changes to it. The next thing I usually do is I take my eraser, and I usually zoom in a little bit to make it easier on myself, because I find when you zoom in, it just is easier to tell if it's smooth. And I just erase what I don't want, or what is causing it to be unsmooth. So erase that a little bit, erase this down here, make that a little bit more rounded. And I find that when you're zoomed in and you have a somewhat medium-sized eraser brush, it works much easier than using the little tiny one, because it's easier to get the straight lines. For this, I'll just erase all this entirely, because it didn't turn out looking very good. And when you get to those little pesky corner things, just go over them. Be patient. And once again, make sure your layer is selected, otherwise it won't erase anything from that layer, and you'll be really confused, and you'll be erasing something that you definitely did not want to be erased. Okay, this is good enough for now. And so I'll zoom back out. Go to your thing and move it basically to where you want. I don't want it over here, so I'll rotate it. I want it like right here for now. The next thing, click enter to apply the changes that you did by rotating it. Next thing that you do is you go to your burn and dodge tools, these two right here. The burn tool makes it darker and it will cast shadows on there. And the dodge tool makes it brighter so it looks like the light is shining on there. It's much, much, much easier to burn something than it is to dodge something. So make sure you don't overdo it on the burn, otherwise you will be going to edit step backward many times because it'll look like just one big black mess if you do it too much. And then when you think, oh, I did it too much, I'll try and dodge it out. It doesn't work that way. So then I set my brush size kind of big to start with, and I set the hardness down so it has a soft look, so you're not just looking like you have whole pieces of circles, and it looks much more smooth and realistic. So set your hardness between 50-60% or so. And then next thing you need to make sure is you have the mid-tones done. I really don't know why that's such a big deal, but it doesn't look right if it's not set that way. And then the next thing is the exposure. The more exposure that you have, the darker that your shadows on like one click will be. So say you have a high exposure, your first click might start off looking like this one over here. But if you have a lower exposure, your first one might start off looking like this gray right here. Usually since my piece is going to be down here, the light's coming from up here, so it's going to be pretty dark. So I'll set it around 60% or so. Okay, then you click out of it. And I usually like to start with the bottom edges because those tend to get darkest. Those will be the darkest because they're not in there. And don't be afraid to click a few times so it shows up. And you can see, because that I have changed my hardness thing, it is much, much, much more smooth than it would be otherwise. So, just clicking around. Okay. After you get some done, usually what I like to do is I like to make my brush really big and go over the whole thing at once, because then I find that it gets more even whatever, and you don't have to worry about, well, did I click this tiny little part of it once or did I overlap in it twice, so then it looks different than both the things around it. Yeah, it's just easier to do it all at once, if you can. So I click on that a few times, and you can see everything's darkening and my shadows are getting darker. So like that. Not the best looking one, but you know, it works. Click it a few times because it's down, so it's pretty dark. And then I usually go back and I make it small again. And then I usually bring my exposure down a little bit. Oops. Exposure down. So it's not making it as dark on one single click as it was before. About halfway. And you just go and fill in. Usually the bottom part is where I go because it's the part that would always be the darkest because there's almost no light being shined down there. Like this. Pretty good for the most part. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to dodge it. Make sure, again, that your hardness isn't set very high because otherwise it looks really fake and just like perfect circular dots on everything, which is never how it is in real life. So I do that. Kind of high because I usually just do like the top edges, makes it easier. And then the exposure, medium, you know, because if you get it too bright, it looks totally fake. But then if you get it too dark, you just have to go over it a few more times. So it's not that hard. Just start clicking where you believe the light would be naturally highlighted. So like this is kind of higher than everything else, so I think it would have more light than everything else. So you just click on it a few times, make sure, and see how it's lightening it? Oh, look, light shining on it. You go like this, go up a few times, light. On the tip where it's the highest, kind of around over here, light. And that's basically my burn and dodge tool. Move the layer to the bottom so it's not just sitting on top of everything. Not down far enough. I have like 30 layers in my document because that's how many it took for me to do this. 29. Okay. Actually, I have probably more like 50. 40 to 50. Probably more like 50 is my guess of how many layers I have because each separate little thing is its own layer. which gets kind of hard to keep track of, especially when they're named layer 23, layer whatever, copy, like 15 copies of one. So that's never easy either. That's a hard thing. Always make sure that's another thing. Always make sure that you're clicked on the right layer. And the way I find that's easiest to do it is go to this button, which is the move thing, and it'll put a box around what's in that layer. So this one's like this, and if I go to this one, it's this piece. That's what that layer is. And this one is that piece. That's what that layer is. That's the easiest way I have found to keep track of that, or to know for sure, because otherwise you just get pretty confused on which one's which. Okay, the last thing, another thing that I basically did all the liquify and burn and dodge for all of these things. Then the last thing I did was I made these shapes. And basically what I did was I took my favorite parts of my other shapes that I'd made. I basically copied them like I did in the beginning with my pen tool. Drew around them with my pen tool and then did the command return and command J to get it in its own separate layer, that part. And a thing to remember about that is when you do the pen tool on one of those layers, if you like draw it and it's all around this thing, it'll only take this part where there's actually something located in there. So don't be afraid if I draw a pen, like you take your pen tool and you draw it like around this hand and you're selected on your hand layer, it'll only take the hand. It won't include anything else. So just have a copy of the hand. So basically what I did with that was I took like my favorite parts of it, like this right here, maybe these little squiggle things up here, and I just took them and I wrapped them around some things. The best way to do that is to put that layer, let's see if I can find one. Maybe not. Let's see here. Of course I can't find one now. Okay, right here. Well, that's not really a good example because it's not working right. That's not it's not the easy way. Anyway, the best thing to do is to, when you have like this as your layer, is to put it right on top of the other layer that you want it to be on. So this one, it's wrapped around this. So the easiest way is to put it right above over here, which means it'll show up on top of that one. And it'll show up like this, and this will all be here, and it'll all be on top. But what you do is, the easiest way is to erase the part right here so the bottom layer shows through. So it gives the illusion that it's completely wrapped around that thing, because obviously you can't see that, so you just assume it's behind it. That's what your eye and your brain naturally do. So that's the easiest way to make it look wrapped around. The last thing I did was for this outside, I basically did the same thing. I took my little favorite parts or whatever. Actually, most of these are like this shape right here. I used this shape like 15 times in my project. And I like pulled them, made them bigger, made them smaller, erased some parts, did that kind of stuff. And I just put them on the outside, gave it some depth. Then to get the blur effect, like right here, you go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And then this will choose how much it's blurred. So see, this started as a perfectly perfect one, but then say I add 4.7 pixels of blur and see how it looks blurry. It kind of gives the perception that it's like 3D and that the picture has some depth. I think that's about it for my project. Oh, the last thing that I did was basically, I went on the internet. I found some things that I like. I put them in the middle because that's what it's holding. In my tutorial, it was holding a heart, but I thought that was kind of, I don't know, cliche, superficial, easy, what everyone would expect. So I put some things that I like. Obviously, I like to play volleyball. I love Nike, have lots of Nike apparel, things like that. And our school mascot. So it's things that I love and mean a lot to me most of the time. So I think that's about it. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you enjoyed my project, and I hope that you enjoyed watching. Thanks.